Say we got what is this, an Acer x223w, an LCD monitor, and it doesn't turn on. I'll show you. So it's plugged in there. I'll block the light here a little bit. You can see it doesn't light up, the screen doesn't light up, the power light doesn't even come on or flicker. And I'm not sure if you can hear this. It's making a whining noise. It sounds like it's coming from a transformer or some type of coil. So let's take it apart, take a look. I also have the service manual for it. So hopefully this should make troubleshooting a breeze. And I've already taken the stand off. There's, if you have one of these, there's a couple little clips. There's a stand that fits here. Right here. And basically this goes here and the clips cover it. You take the clips off, there's a couple screws. And then there's one screw down here. And a little hole there. And then the rest of it is just plastic clips. And this is just a pain in the butt, I know. So what I always do is just use an old gift card or an old credit card. Okay, so that's that. And then there are 2 screws on either side, it looks like. So we'll take those off. Okay. So now we're going to slide it out. There's this little thing here. It should just lift right out of the case. There it goes. Alright. Now, depending on where you're working, if you're concerned about scratching the screen, just put a towel down or something. This is just paper. It's not an anti-static mat or anything. I just use, poster board. So it looks like this top piece comes off. And it looks like it's just held on by tape. And it's off. I'm just going to throw that out. Now we're going to disconnect this ribbon here. Let me just lift that little thing up, pull this out, and it's glued to the bottle, so I'm just going to gently pull it up, and then pull the ribbon out. And there we go. So I'm going to leave this here, that way we can plug everything back in. It's not hurting anything. So this looks like, just because the screen's plugged into here, so that looks like the logic board. Since this is covered, this is the power supply. And let's pull this board out. And if there are capacitors, you want to discharge them first before you drop a screw on the board. But like I said, it looks like they've covered them pretty good. Now be very careful not to put too much weight on this, because this is the back of the panel. diagonally out. We're going to separate that from there. So let's take a look at the power supply here. And first thing we always do is look for obvious signs of distress, any burnt paths, any burnt components, leaking capacitors, signs of arcing. You can tell, it just went like, is that hair? That's leftover hot glue. You can tell this got really hot because the board's discolored. Let's see, what are they? Oh, we'll look that up. I can't even read it. We'll look those up in the service manual. So let's try this. Let me get this out of here. And let's very carefully plug it in and see if it still makes the sound when there's no load on it. Slightly. Very, very slightly. So one of the things I just noticed off camera was the service manual I have for this is actually for a different revision. So the power supply, let's see, where you at? This is the board, this is the power supply, and if you look, it looks completely different. And I started going through and tracing some of the paths, and it's a completely different design. They use uses a different controller IC. So we're going to be, kind of shooting in the dark in this one, but that's okay. It's just the same way you would do it without a service manual. So first thing I want to do is, I did notice though in the process of doing that, these two caps here. Not sure how well you can see that, but you notice they're swollen up top. And that noise that we heard, if you were able to hear it, is kind of a whining noise, and that's a high frequency. So if the waveform that's hitting a transformer or is hitting a coil is not a clean sine wave, and it's a triangle wave or a square wave, you could possibly get, or actually not possibly, you will get a bit of a buzzing or a whine. So that's where that may be coming from. So what I want to do is plug this in. And before I replace these, I just want to see a before and after. Because we could just replace those caps and this thing could just start working, but I want to see what it looks like. I want to see what the waveform looks like. Alright, so I got a craptacular scope, so bear with me. Actually looking, there's one I want to pick up, but can't afford it just at the moment. So if you can hear that, that's the noise. So let's do this. Let's plug. Try to be careful not to short out anything on the board. There's the 5-volt line. And there's ground. Now this is 5 volts DC. This should be solid, just a straight line. But look at what we got. Oh. All right, so let's turn this up a bit. And you can see what's happening there. You're getting those spikes. Now actually, it's not so much spikes. So let's do this. Let's zero that out. And right now it's on 2 volts per division. So 2, 4, 6. This up here, I'm not even sure if you can see this. This line up here would be 6. So this is actually around 5 here. and then you get these peaks. So there's the problem that we have. It's not clean DC voltage. So what we're going to do first is, because I know that these are bad, we're going to replace these two caps and just see if that does anything. Let's keep it simple. Once we do that, we'll see if it still makes that noise, and we'll check out what the voltage looks like, the power output looks like, and go from there. So this is a 220 microfarad 10 volt. And this one over here is a, where's that? It's a 1000 microfarad 10 volt. So let me see if I can find, so it's a 2200, 22 and 1000. So it looks like there's 1000 on here. And it's a 16 volt. So we'll get that one off of here. And I found a 2200 right here. Got all kinds of epoxy on it. And yeah, if you're doing this professionally, you would have these parts on hand, brand new, and you would replace them with new parts not used. I am doing this as a hobby and fixing things for people if they don't want to spend a lot of money on them. These people are happy to get a couple of years extra out of these parts or out of these components. Often they get much longer than that. And get this out of the way. Just want to break that loose. I want to get all this epoxy broken loose before I try and desolder. We know these caps are bad, so I'm not really concerned about harming them. I just want to make it easier to get the new ones in. Okay, the 2200's out. Back in the proper polarity. You always make sure it's in the proper polarity if it's a polarized cap. Hope that's not too tall. If it is, I'll have to lay it down and use a jumper wire or something. We'll make it work. And this could have even been the inductor that we heard whining. Might even have to wind up replacing that, but it looks like it's okay. It's not split. So what happens is if coils or inductors, like a transformer is an inductor. It just is two of them, essentially. And they like a nice, smooth sine wave. Doesn't mean they're always going to get it. But when you have something that has a square wave in it, and it starts smacking the coil, it's going to complain a little bit. It's going to make some noise. Okay, now I'm going to clean that up because that is some terrible soldering. Looking to make sure nothing's bridged. That shouldn't be bridged. Make sure it's somewhat solid. This needs to go down further. So I want this thing to sit flush with the board. Alright, let's fire it up and see what happens. Still hearing it whine. Oh wait, it's going away. And you know what? Blue light just came on. Look at that. Nice, solid 5 volts. Alright, I'm going to unplug it. It's still making a noise. I don't like that. Could mean another one of these caps is going bad. But let's, before we go any further, let me hook this up to the panel. Yep, and the problem is that cap is way too big. So I'll have to lay it on its side, glue it in place, and then run a jumper wire. Okay, so instead of running a jumper, I just went and found another cap that's smaller. This orange stuff that's on under orange or brown is just epoxy or glue. It's not electrolytic fluid or anything like that has leaked out. This cap actually looks like it's in good shape. It's out of something I recently parted out, so, and the problem that the device had was not related to these. So let's clean this up. I should have done this in the first place. Once again, I just want to plug this in, just make sure it powers up like before I plug it all in, put it all together, make sure that cap isn't in fact bad, but I'm 99.9% sure it's okay. I'm just trying to be careful when I plug this in because we got a blue light. Where are you at? There we are. Alright, so here's how we're going to unplug that. It still makes a bit of a noise, and I don't like that, and I'm going to go back through and check these other caps. Because and I'm going to probe around with the scope just to see what else. But before I do any of that, I want to make sure that this panel's good and that the controller board is still working. Chances are it's okay, but when you throw that kind of dirty voltage stuff, or noisy voltage. All kinds of weird things can happen, but it should be okay. Ah, nice. Perfect. This one. This is always the fun part, trying to figure out what screws went where. Now, the thing is, the reason I'm not too concerned about that whine, or I should say the remaining whine that it's doing, is because once we get a load placed on the power supply, that may go away. And right now there is really not much of a load. There's this, but it doesn't really use much power. The backlight is really what uses the majority of the power. So if we get that plugged in, and we'll see if what it sounds like then. Man, that board has really gotten cooked. It's really sagging in the middle. Ooh well. Okay. These keys, I can go one direction. Okay, so, yeah, just do keys moving. Just take it. And I really hope that cover didn't slip, because right about now we're going to hear a big pop if it did. Let's flip this over. And let's see what we get. And the light's turned off just so you can see. Hopefully the camera picks this up. I'm going to plug it in. Let's see what we get. Nothing. Why do we get nothing? Oh, it just takes a minute. Yep, no signal. So I have a HDMI to DVI adapter. I'll plug my laptop into the monitor. And I have it on the bias screen, so I'm hoping that that'll work. And there it is. Now, it's not the brightest thing in the world. It's actually a lot brighter in person than it is on camera, from what I can tell. And I bet you that the current going to the backlight is not very clean, and it may need another cap in it. But it does in fact work. Actually, it looks pretty good. Everything's pretty uniform. All the backlights seem to be working. I can see it's very uniform. So I think if anything, it can just be used like this. But I am going to take the power supply back apart and throw another couple caps in it just for giggles. But other than that, we went from a completely non-working monitor to a monitor that's now working just fine. And really all it was a couple capacitors, so this is something that anybody can do. And like I said, the service manual fell through because it was the wrong revision. So we just had to rely on testing, and and I didn't have to get that far. We noticed the caps were swollen and replaced those, and it just worked. So again, If you got something like this that's broken, tear it apart, see what you can find. Just be careful about it. You don't want to get zapped by any capacitors that are still charged. So that'll be it for today. I'm going to put this back together. Well, I'm going to swap out some caps, some other additional caps, put it back together, and that'll be it. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, put them down below, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.